Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is September 11th, 2019, folks. 18 years ago this morning, I was getting ready for my first flight as a pilot for American Airlines. I was living in Fort Worth at the time, and I was also flying the FA-18 Hornet for the U.S. Navy Reserve with the hunters of Strike Fighter Squadron 201. I was packing, literally packing for my trip when my wife came in and said, "Hey, you better come take a look at the TV." She said, somebody hit the World Trade Center with an airplane. I said, "Hey, man, probably some idiot in a small airplane or just bad weather and, whatever." And she said, "You better come take a look at the TV." And just looking at her face, I knew that something was wrong. Went out. Well, Matthew was, she's about a year old, and picked him up and looked at the TV, and beautiful day in New York City, and a massive smoking hole in the Trade Center. And I'm standing there, I was going through my mental aviation checklist of how this could have happened when the second airplane hit. And I immediately knew we were under attack. I raced into the bedroom. It's actually in my office. My American Airlines uniform still in the plastic from the cleaners after getting it tailored and pressed for my first flight. I pushed that out of the way, threw on my flight suit, threw on my boots, and I think I broke the land speed record getting out to Naval Air Station Fort Worth, where me and another buddy made it out there just before they closed the air station, and about four other of the SPADs, the 457th Fighter Squadron, four other guys next door that flew F-16s. We all got together. We were tied into NORAD, the North American Air Defense System, and we started flying. The SPADs flew Combat Air Patrol, and Gruff and I were on Alert 5, fully armed and ready to go to defend this country. So I went from potentially flying in an airliner that day to shooting one down. To maybe even shooting down a squadron mate out of I think the 18 guys that flew in my reserve squadron. Most of them were airborne that day. Could you imagine being ordered to shoot down an airliner over this country, let alone one flown by one of your best friends? Just an absolutely horrific day for this country, and we kind of throw it away as a catchphrase. Never forget. We're starting to forget, folks. I mean, this is just absolutely insane. We have radical Islamic folks electing or in Washington, folks, right? Ilhan Omar. Some people did something on 9/11. Some people. And let me show you the New York Times. These are the assholes. These are the people that say guns are the problem, right? Guns are killing people. Guns are killing people. You know what they did? They had a tweet today that said airplanes took aim and brought down the World Trade Center. A freaking airplane took aim and brought down the World Trade Centers. Airplanes, folks. Not radical Islamic terrorists who commandeered the airplanes, but the airplanes. Apparently airplanes took off that day and mysteriously flew in to the World Trade Centers. They finally deleted it but this, never forget. We're forgetting, ladies and gentlemen. We're forgetting. Do not ever forget this. People holding hands rather than burn to death. They selected to jump. And there's Facebook, the limousine liberals at Facebook, covering these pictures because they don't want you to remember. They don't want you to remember who did this. Absolute disgrace. I will never forget this day. Changed my life. Obviously, weeks later, I got furloughed from American Airlines and lost my job, man. I had to scramble. I started trading full time, and my life took a completely different turn. Got mobilized for Operation Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom, and just horrific. Do not say never forget and then forget. I know most of you who are watching this video right now are great Americans, and you understand that, but you got to remind people, folks. I thank God for my family, and thank God my son Matthew is at Norwich University, wants to be a Marine fighter pilot. My son Jack wants to serve his country in the Navy. We're slowly forgetting, man. Some people did something. Some airplanes did something. That's the problem in this country. You look at that, man. You look at these people. You remember their names and their faces. It's awful. I will never forget this day, and I hope you don't either. And please stop this type of crap, man. When you see it, call it out. It's insane. This is the problem with this country, folks. It's a disgrace. Seems a little, you know, to switch from this to the markets, but we have to carry on. We have to do our jobs, and that's the other way you defeat these pieces of shit is you actually you get better, man. First of all, we turned them into hair, teeth, and eyeballs. Biggest strike on ISIS in years. I think in Iraq the other day, just completely leveled this island that had a bunch of ragheads on it. ISIS folks trying to reconstitute. We're going to find you and we're going to kill you. Period. This will never happen again, and if it does, we deserve it. And speaking of this type of thing, we have Antifa in this country, right? We have people in Portland, Oregon, a couple weeks ago running around with communist flags and socialist and beating up reporters and, demanding socialism in this country, running around with socialist flags and communist flags. We have people in Hong Kong yearning to be free, asking for the president to liberate Hong Kong, demanding that they have their own Second Amendment so they can stand up to tyranny. We live in bizarro world, folks. We have people in this country wanting to take guns and wanting socialism, and people in Hong Kong saying, what are you, nuts? Are you people stupid? I would swap the people in Portland who did this any day with all of these hardworking, freedom-loving people in Hong Kong. Why do I bring this up? Because it is part of the trade, man. Look at this. Look at this guy. Trump. This is the other reason that the trade deal is going to be very, very tough. Listen, use your brain, folks. Why is Beijing? Look at this today. China waives tariffs on 16 types of U.S. goods in latest attempt to sweeten the trade deal. The only reason right now, ladies and gentlemen, that China is, quote, trying to sweeten the trade deal is because they're going to crack down on Hong Kong and they're going to make Trump choose. Do you want a trade deal leading to your reelection, or do you want to give us shit about Hong Kong when we go and crush it? He can't. And I took a survey of my TGO members recently, and they said, unfortunately, he'd take the trade deal. He can't. And even if he did, it won't go through, ladies and gentlemen. We have Republican lawmakers and Democrats agreeing that, hey, if they go Tiananmen Square in Hong Kong, not only will there be no trade deal, we will implement sanctions. So Xi is playing this spectacularly. Beijing has proof of foreign intervention in Hong Kong unrest, summons the German ambassador. Folks, this is going to get bad. This is why, Dow's up 90 points right now, and things, here we go. We kind of had this short squeeze, rip your face off through the 50-day moving average, but we're hovering up here. We ain't going to hover for long. So obviously the stocks are ticking higher, extending gains a little bit, but don't believe this, ladies and gentlemen. Don't believe this. Have one hand on the ejection handle and look at the door, man. The president, absolute idiots at the Fed. The Fed needs to reduce rates to zero, or you ready for this? Less than zero. Blaming boneheads at the Fed, the president says the U.S. is missing out on an opportunity. So, folks, Jerome Powell last week said, hey, we're not looking at a recession anytime soon, and maybe we'll get a quarter point when we meet on September 18th. Ladies and gentlemen, the market will be let down with whatever the Fed does on September 18th, and get ready for this market to go back down to the 50-day moving average. The president of the United States is beating the hell out of the Fed to reduce rates to zero or less, and he's also beating them to have what? Implement QE, quantitative easing. He wants the Fed under Barack Hussein Obama. Love that guy's name. Barack Hussein Obama, which had near zero interest rates and quantitative easing. I mean, the president's got a point there. If he had the Fed that Obama had, the Dow would be at 35,000, the S&P would be at 3,500, but he doesn't. So, folks, be very, very careful right now with this thing hovering up here. Remember, whenever we go through a moving average with any sort of airspeed, it usually goes right back to test it. Imploded through the 50-day here, went back up to test it as resistance, and yep, we failed. How about this time? Ripped through it, and then we came back to test it as support, and then higher. Ripped through it, came back up to test it as resistance, and it was resistance about 6 times in a row. Ripped through it higher, haven't tested it as resistance. This would be one of the first times in 27 years I've ever seen it rip through here and just hover and not retest. Don't believe it, folks. Get hedged through the Fed meeting next week, and I'm going to be covering this today at 12:30 Eastern over at the Investors Expo. I think we have 4 or 5 speakers that are presenting, and I'm going on first. But this is true. Stocks are poised to hit another record this week, but investor mood is darkened, right? Despite record highs, Americans haven't been this downbeat on stocks since Trump was elected. Oh boy. So, and remember this time last fall, stocks are back near records, but memories of 2018 leaves investors uneasy. Be very, very, very careful, ladies and gentlemen, of what goes through these moving averages. And us hovering up here is not bullish, in my opinion. We're going to have to retest these lows before we go higher. And that's my prediction. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to be over at the Investors Expo at 12:30, so we will not be doing our accelerated retirement brief today at 1 o'clock. You guys should all go head over to there because I'm going to talk through, potentially hedging against a pullback here and a spike in volatility. Okay. Again, please never forget this. Do not let this country forget. Do not let your fellow Americans forget what happened on this day 18 years ago. It changed my life, but hey, man, that's small potatoes compared with the 3,000 folks who just never to smile again, never to hold their loved ones again, and the men and women who are dying to this day from injuries related to these attacks. We'll come and get you, man. We're coming after you. Have a great rest of your day, and God bless.